3 days before my wedding, my father pointed at Grandpa's place card and said, "He's a retired janitor. He embarrasses us." My mother tore the card in half. I told them Grandpa was staying at the head table and walking me down the aisle. So they buttoned their coats and walked out of the rehearsal without looking back. I thought that was the cruelest thing they could do. I was wrong. At the reception, Dad's CEO suddenly set down her glass, crossed the ballroom, and stopped in front of Grandpa. Then she said 4 words that drained every ounce of color from my father's face. "My name is Kelly Morgan. I'm 31, and I work as a pediatric occupational therapist most mornings. I sit on a foam mat beneath fluorescent lights, helping children do things other people barely notice. Button a shirt, hold a spoon, take 3 steps without reaching for a wall. The week before my wedding, one little girl finally fastened her own coat. She stared at the button like she had conquered a mountain, then threw both arms around me. I remember thinking how strange it was that my parents had spent their whole lives admiring big titles, while Grandpa Thomas had taught me to celebrate the small victories that kept people moving. He had raised me since I was 8. My parents, Daniel and Laura, moved to Indianapolis for work and promised I would stay with Grandpa for 1 semester. 1 semester became a year, then middle school, then graduation. They still visited. They sent birthday gifts. They appeared in polished clothes, carrying restaurant reservations and questions about my grades. But Grandpa was the one who packed my lunches. His house always smelled like black coffee, laundry soap, and the cedar chips he kept in the hallway closet. He learned to braid my hair from a library book. He sat in the front row at every school performance, even when I played a tree with no lines. Whenever I came home embarrassed or angry, he would set down whatever he was fixing and say, "Always leave people with more dignity than you found them." My fiancé, Ben Carter, understood why that sentence mattered. Ben teaches high school history. He proposed in our kitchen while pasta water boiled over behind him. He makes terrible jokes, buys grocery store flowers, and never asks me to become smaller so he can feel taller. We planned a simple fall wedding in Fort Wayne. Then my parents offered to contribute about $25,000. A gift, I told them. Not a vote. Dad smiled. Of course, within 2 weeks. Mom had changed the florist, upgraded the menu, and hired another photographer. Then Dad sent me a guest list with more than 20 company executives I had never met. At the top was Rebecca Shaw, his CEO. Ben looked at the list, then at me. "Kelly," he said quietly. When did our wedding become his interview? I laughed because I didn't want to answer. Then the first seating chart arrived, and I found Grandpa's name beside the service door. I called Mom before I finished scrolling. "Why is Grandpa beside the service door?" She gave a soft sigh, the one she used when clients asked for something she had already decided they did not need. "He'll be more comfortable there. It's quieter. He belongs at the head table." Kelly, this is not about belonging. It's about flow. Flow. That was the first word they used to make cruelty sound professional. The next morning, Dad sent a revised photography schedule. There were separate shots for the wedding party, the executive guests, and immediate family. Grandpa's name was missing. When I asked about it, Dad said, "We can get a casual one later." Casual. After 23 years of breakfasts, school pickups, fevers, broken hearts, and front row seats, the man who raised me had been reduced to a casual photo. I drove to Grandpa's house that evening. He was kneeling beside the porch, tightening a loose rail with an old wrench. I showed him the seating chart. He studied it for a few seconds, then handed it back. "I've sat near worse doors." "That isn't the point. It's one night." "Kiddo." He smiled, but his thumb kept rubbing the edge of the paper until it bent. That was when Aunt Emily told me why Dad hated Grandpa's uniform. When Dad was 13, some boys at school saw Grandpa cleaning a hallway. They tossed wrappers at his feet and called Dad the janitor's boy. Dad ran. That night, he begged Grandpa to find another job. Grandpa refused. "A uniform tells people what work I do," he told him. "It doesn't tell them who I am." Dad remembered the humiliation. He forgot the lesson. Over the next week, Mom called Ben's parents, my cousin Ashley, and even our pastor. Everyone delivered the same message in slightly different wrapping. Keep the peace. Do not ruin your father's opportunity. It is only one chair. Then I found the family introduction Dad had written for the reception. Grandpa was described as an elderly relative who helped during Kelly's childhood. Helped. Like he had watered the plants while my parents were away. That night, Dad finally admitted the truth. Rebecca Shaw was evaluating candidates for a senior leadership role, and he did not want his background becoming part of the conversation. I returned the unused portion of their money, canceled every upgrade that had not been finalized, and called the venue. My name stays on every decision, I said. The coordinator confirmed it. An hour later, Dad sent one message. We will settle this at the rehearsal. And I knew he was not coming to discuss a chair. The rehearsal went smoothly enough to make me nervous. Pastor Andrew walked us through the processional twice. Ben's mother cried during the practice vows. Grandpa stood at the back of the aisle in his navy suit, one hand resting over the small velvet box that held my grandmother's bracelet. Then Dad said, "Kelly, family only." The dressing room smelled like dust, old wood, and somebody's lemon perfume. Mom stood beside a revised seating chart. Dad closed the door behind me. "This ends tonight," he said. "Thomas leaves the head table. I walk you down the aisle. He stays out of the formal photographs." I stared at him. He raised me. Dad's jaw tightened. "He's a retired janitor. He embarrasses us." Mom reached into her folder and pulled out the place card I had written by hand. Thomas Morgan head table. She tore it cleanly in half. "We'll replace it with something more appropriate," she said. The door moved behind them. Grandpa was standing there. He held the bracelet box in both hands. His face was calm, but the tendons in his neck had gone tight. "I'll make it easy," he said. "Put me wherever the room needs me." That broke something open inside me. I picked up both pieces of the card and pressed them together on the table. "No." Mom blinked. I looked at Dad. "I'm not losing you over him. I'm finally seeing what you're willing to lose me for." His face hardened. I told them Grandpa would sit beside me. He would walk me down the aisle. Their names were being removed from every vendor contact. They could attend as guests, or they could stay home. Dad buttoned his jacket. "Then enjoy explaining this to everyone." They walked out. The church doors slammed hard enough to shake the glass. I made it to the parking lot before my knees gave out. Ben found me sitting against the cold side of his car, still holding the torn card. Grandpa crouched beside me. "Let me step back," he whispered. "You shouldn't lose your parents because of me." I looked at the man who had never once made me earn his love. "Walk me down the aisle," I said. He closed his eyes for 1 second. Then he nodded. That night, Mom sent one final message. They would still attend. Rebecca Shaw had confirmed she was coming. Saturday came bright and cold, the kind of early fall morning that made every sound feel sharper. Grandpa arrived in the same navy suit he had worn to my high school graduation. The shoulders hung a little loose now, but every crease was perfect. He held out Grandma's bracelet. "She would have fussed over your hair," he said. I laughed, then cried, then let him fasten it around my wrist. Dad and Mom were already seated when the music began. 3rd row. They looked flawless. Dad's tie was centered. Mom's smile was polished and empty. For 1 weak second, I hoped he would stand. Cross the aisle and admit he had been wrong. He didn't. Grandpa offered me his arm. His sleeve was warm beneath my hand. His fingers were rough from years of fixing locks, replacing tiles, and cleaning up messes nobody noticed. "You ready?" "Kiddo, no." "Good, means it matters." Then he walked me down the aisle. Ben waited at the front, eyes shining. When he saw Grandpa beside me, he gave him a small nod that said everything. The ceremony was simple, honest, no corporate introductions, no staged applause. For the first time in months, the wedding felt like ours. At the reception, the repaired place card stood before Grandpa's chair. Thomas Morgan head table. A thin strip of clear tape crossed the middle. I could have rewritten it, but I wanted the tear visible. Dad noticed. His eyes stayed on it half a second too long before he turned toward a group of executives and smiled. Mom moved through the room as if nothing had happened, adjusting napkins. guiding guests toward better lighting, laughing too brightly at jokes she could not have heard. Then Rebecca Shaw arrived. Dad reached her before she made it 10 feet inside. He shook her hand and began steering her from one director to another. I watched him perform the version of himself he had built for years. Rebecca listened politely. Then her eyes moved past his shoulder. She stopped. Dad kept talking before realizing she was no longer looking at him. Rebecca stared toward our table, toward Grandpa. Then she set down her glass. The room quieted in pieces. One conversation stopped, then another, as Rebecca crossed the ballroom alone. Dad turned and followed her gaze. The smile left his face. Grandpa was cutting his chicken. He did not look up until Rebecca stopped beside him. "Mr. Morgan?" He studied her face. Then his eyes softened. Rebecca. Her hand rose to her mouth. She nodded once, fighting tears. Then she said the 4 words. "You saved my future." Dad's face went white. His hand tightened around his glass. The ice clicked against the rim. Rebecca asked Grandpa if she could say more. He glanced at me, then back at her. "That's your story to tell." She faced the room. Years earlier, she said. She had been a single mother taking night classes while working full-time. Some nights, she slept in a hallway between her shift and class because going home meant missing the last bus back. Most people walked past her. Grandpa didn't. He noticed she was disappearing from class. He guided her to student support, helped her find childcare assistance, and connected her with a campus job. When her car broke down before her final exam, he drove her. When she came up short on the exam fee, he paid the remaining $300. "He never made me feel ashamed," Rebecca said. "He never asked what I could do for him later." She looked at Grandpa. "He only told me to help the next person when I could." Her voice shook. "Every person I've mentored since then started with what he did for me." The room rose. No one told them to. They simply stood. Applause rolled across the ballroom, loud enough to make the glasses tremble. Grandpa hated attention, but when I took his hand, he squeezed mine. Across the room, Dad stood frozen beside the people he had spent all evening trying to impress. The man he wanted hidden had become the most respected person there. Mom recovered first. She appeared beside Grandpa with dessert and a camera-ready smile. "Dad," she said warmly, a word I had barely heard her use for him. Grandpa accepted the plate. He did not return the performance. A few minutes later, Dad touched my elbow. "Hallway. Please." Outside the ballroom, his voice dropped. "You need to talk to him. About what, the leadership position? Rebecca listens to him. He listens to you." I stared at him. "No apology. Just another opportunity. You hid him when you thought he had nothing to offer." I said. "You don't get to use him now." His jaw tightened. "I have worked 25 years for this, and he spent 23 raising your daughter. We are family. Family is not a tool you pick up when it becomes useful." I walked away before he could answer. Then I asked the band leader to change the schedule. When the music softened, I took the microphone. "It's time for the family dance." Every head turned toward Dad. He straightened his jacket. I walked past him. I stopped in front of Grandpa and held out my hand. "You never made me earn a place in your life," I said. "Let me honor the place you already had in mine." The room blurred as he stood. We danced beneath the warm lights. For a few seconds, I was 11 again, standing on his shoes in the kitchen while he counted under his breath. 1, 2, 3. I started crying. He leaned closer. "You left this room with more dignity than you found it," he whispered. And for the first time in my life, I knew I had. Nothing dramatic happened to Dad that night. Rebecca did not fire him at my wedding. Grandpa did not ask her to punish him. No one stood beside the cake and announced that justice had been served. Real consequences took longer. Over the next 3 months, Dad's company continued its leadership review. They looked at employee feedback, turnover, internal complaints, and how each candidate treated the people below them. Dad had strong numbers. He also had a pattern. Several managers said he cared more about appearances than problems. Frontline employees described him as distant, 2 supervisors said he often dismissed concerns until someone important repeated them. Rebecca did not create that record. She simply stopped overlooking it. The position went to someone else. Dad kept his job, his office, and the same title he had before. That almost made it harder for him. He still walked into the same building every morning, surrounded by people who had watched him try to hide his own father. In December, he mailed me a letter. It was only 1 page. He wrote that he had spent most of his life running from the boy people mocked at school, somewhere along the way. He had started punishing Grandpa for reminding him that boy still existed. Then, he wrote, "I made you carry my shame." 2. I read that sentence 3 times. I did not answer right away. An apology can open a door, but it cannot erase what happened on the other side of it. Mom sent an expensive serving set for Christmas with no note beyond our names. I returned it. I told her I did not need another gift. I needed her to name what she had done without calling it stress, planning, or a misunderstanding. She did not respond for 2 weeks. Then she sent 6 words. I tore the card. "I'm sorry. It was not enough, but it was the first honest thing she had given me." Rebecca later asked Grandpa to help shape a support program for night students, single parents, and workers who needed help with childcare, transportation, or exam costs. He agreed on one condition: no building named after me. The program launched that spring. Grandpa still lived in the same little house. He still repaired things that did not need repairing. He still made coffee strong enough to strip paint. On his kitchen windowsill sat the place card I had taped back together. Thomas Morgan Head Table. The tear was still visible. I once offered to make him a new one. He shook his head. Being repaired doesn't mean pretending you were never torn. I think about that whenever someone asks whether my family healed. Some parts did. Some parts are still deciding whether they want to. Grandpa was worthy of that head table before Rebecca ever crossed the ballroom. Her 4 words did not create his value. They only exposed the people who had refused to see it. I learned that love should never require you to shrink someone else, and setting a boundary does not make you disloyal. Sometimes justice is simply refusing to hide the truth any longer. If someone ordinary showed up for you when everyone else walked away, tell me about them in the comments. Share this story, and subscribe for more family stories where quiet dignity finally gets heard.